So you're visiting a new mountain for the first time. Obviously, you don't want to waste half of your trip stuck in lift lines or fighting through flat spots. Thankfully, resorts provide a helpful but often misunderstood tool, the trail map. Today, we're going through all the things you should look at on a trail map in order to make the most out of your ski day. For those new to our channel, our flagship series, Insider's Guide, takes a deep dive into the same kind of process we're presenting here. Across 50+ episodes spanning mountains on 3 continents and in 5 countries, we've gained extensive experience spotting the common quirks and subtleties of trail maps. While this guide is designed to be general and won't cover every detail, it provides a solid foundation. That said, we still highly recommend checking out the Insider's Guide for the specific mountain you plan to visit, as it reflects the kind of hands-on experience that only comes with time on the slopes. Before we go any further, it's worth noting that trail maps vary a lot around the world. This guide focuses primarily on the style used across Western North America, since that's where most of our experience comes from. Many European and Alps maps follow a different visual logic, so some of these principles may not apply as directly. For this video, we're going to start by looking at lift logistics, then move into terrain, and wrap it all up with an example of planning purely by the trail map. All that out of the way, let's get straight into it. The first subtle feature trail maps can reveal is an extremely crucial one that nobody looks at: sun exposure. Runs facing north or tucked into bowl areas often hold powder longer, while south-facing slopes soften earlier in the day. Even if the map doesn't explicitly show the sun, noting how runs are oriented relative to the mountain can help you target the best snow conditions throughout the day. Pairing the trail map with an external resource such as openskimap.org can help you identify areas that will likely have better snow retention and quality. Now, the most useful insight a trail map can offer is general crowd flow. A few key details make a big difference, starting with out-of-base routes. Many ski areas have a main lift out of the base, often bigger, detachable, or serving more terrain that most skiers naturally gravitate toward. But there's often an alternative route that may not be obvious at first glance, yet can save significant time. It's basically the ski resort version of taking the scenic route, except faster and less crowded. Take Winter Park, Colorado, for instance. Most people head straight for the gondola in the morning since it accesses a bulk of the mountain and is a more premium lift. However, a closer look shows that you can reach similar terrain via Arrow to Snowasis and the Explorer lift, a route that can be surprisingly efficient. Now, let's try this at Park City's Mountain Village. Crescent and Payday are flashy, high-capacity lifts accessing major terrain, so they tend to get busy. Looking for alternative out-of-base lifts? Eagle to King Khan is a route that can get you nearly as high, often quicker even though it requires 2 lift rides. Try it yourself. On the Purgatory map, identify the primary route out of the village, then find an alternative that links with other lifts. Assume the number 6 chair is not running. This number 1 6-pack is the primary lift here since it's the biggest and fastest lift, but the number 4 double combined with the number 2 or number 3 chairs often offers a time-saving alternative. With the base areas, there is sometimes also a more subtle indication that you'll want to pay attention to: spacing between lift terminals. While trail maps are not to scale, the artists who paint them do a good job depicting general base area layouts for exactly this purpose. Over at Beaver Creek, a majority of people start their day right in front of the Centennial Express, which can reasonably be deemed the primary lift. However, if you look closely at the map, you can see this bridge that takes you to the Strawberry Express, a nuance many don't notice, thus rendering Strawberry consistently less busy than Centennial. As a small aside, rather interestingly, it seems that this difference has been noticeably shortening each of the past few seasons, but our point about reading the trail map still stands. Another example is Gore Mountain, at which the gondola is closer to the parking lot and is thus more attractive to the majority. This renders the Adirondack Express a good, quicker alternative, even though as a standalone it's still a pretty major lift. The final thing to check in a base area are parallel lifts. Rather than a true alternative route like we covered before, this is where you're looking for something like this setup from Camelback, Pennsylvania. Here, the Black Bear 6 is the primary lift, but right next door is the Bailey Double. On first glance, Bailey looks pretty useless, but if there's enough of a crowd to justify running both, it's likely that taking Bailey will actually be faster than Black Bear. Although Bailey has a longer ride, a majority of people will gravitate towards the bigger, faster lift next door, at a minimum balancing out the overall time of the two nearly identical routes. In a lift fleet as a whole, crowd flow shifts throughout the day. Early lifts out of base get busy fast, mid-morning sees long lines forming at mid-mountain lifts, and post-lunch periods can see chokes at major egress lifts. Pairing lift strategy with timing can help you avoid congestion and make the most of your ski day. The primary out-of-base lifts are definite no-goes on busy mornings, but once everybody's up on the hill, it's possible that skiing to the base area can make for some nice efficient turns in the afternoon. Or, for a more concrete example, it's reasonable to assume that a lift like Sky at Heavenly will get pretty busy towards the end of the day, since it's the only way to get back to this left-hand side of the map from the right. Alright, so you've gotten past the out-of-base headache. The next thing you'll want to look for are mid-mountain choke points. These can be prompted by many different things, but the common red herring is the convergence or divergence of multiple popular trails. We love to come back to this example often because it's one of the most clear-cut out there. Keystone's Durkheim Mountain features this one green, Schoolmarm, that then splits into at least 10 different routes. Thus, you have the traffic of 10 trails all jammed together for the first ridge running section of the map. It's as unpleasant as you could imagine. We've nicknamed it School Swarm. In this case, you can't really avoid it, but it's nonetheless good to know so that you're not surprised when you find yourself in the middle of one such bottleneck. Of course, all of those trails that split off have to come back together at some point, and at Keystone, it happens to be the Montezuma Express. With at least 10 major runs worth of traffic, Montezuma gets absolutely swamped. It's in this latter scenario that you can apply what we discussed with base areas. How can you ski that terrain without using the lift it all chokes down to? In some cases it's not possible, so you'll want to identify those areas and hit them at the beginning and end rather than the middle of the day. In Keystone's case, however, you probably already realized that you can ski from Montezuma on down to the Summit Express. When pairing that with the small detail of Summit's starting location being a bit away from the base area, we can reasonably expect that Summit is going to have shorter lines than both the River Run Gondola, which will get a majority of the base area traffic, and Montezuma, which will get a majority of the mid-mountain traffic. Let's give you a try. Take a look at this main face of North Star, California, and identify the major mid-mountain choke point. In this case, about 24 runs all flow down into this area by the bottom of the Comstock Express. As such, Comstock and the few runs below it get absolutely swamped due to the sheer volume of traffic they're forced to handle. Of course, outside of choke points, some pods and runs are just busy in general. The busiest terrain pods are often defined by the resort, so you'll want to know the general character of the mountain you plan to visit. Snowbird, Utah is famous for its powder skiing in its bowls, so it should come as no surprise that the Little Cloud and Mineral Basin areas, particularly the latter, get swarmed. I mean seriously, if you think crowds are only a problem in cities, try standing in Mineral Basin at 10 a.m. Suddenly you understand rush hour in a whole new way. Outside of general character, however, beginner and intermediate terrain is by far the most popular at almost every resort. As you can see, Crested Butte has a huge number of blues right in the middle of the mountain, so one could reasonably expect that area to be the busiest on the mountain. This also ties into lifts. Since Mineral Basin is likely extremely busy, its lift likely gets long lines. The same can be said for Crested Butte's Paradise Express. Looking at this map of Sun Valley, can you identify which terrain pod is likely the busiest? When we look at it, our eyes are immediately drawn to the one place with multiple greens, Seattle Ridge, and this is indeed the most reliably busy part of the mountain. When talking about which run is the busiest within a particular area, there's a few other things to look for. These runs are commonly the easiest routes down, or are what is the clear-cut, quote-unquote main trail in a pod. Take a look at this part of Jackson Hole. Despite the existence of other blue trails and many other options, Amphitheater sticks out because it is straight, runs right down the middle, and is painted pretty wide. You can apply some of the same principles here at Wolf Creek. Over off the Raven Chair, despite the plurality of options, since Bunny Hop is the most direct green, it is the most popular run in the near vicinity, making it fairly busy. The great thing about identifying these popular runs, contrary to the choke points, is that these can almost always be circumvented. However, they can be harder to identify. Let's go ahead and give a test example. Out of these trails off Bald Eagle Mountain at Deer Valley, which is most likely to be exceptionally crowded? In this case, Success is the only green route down, is long, and has many other runs splitting off from it. Now, it's often hard to identify flat spots on trail maps, but there are a few indicators for what are often the most heinous offenders. There are 3 telltale signs. The first is the zigzag. Here at Telluride, you can see this blue going back and forth 8, maybe 10 times. It is entirely possible that this run is graded well and isn't flat, which is why this category is so difficult. However, with so many switchbacks on this trail, there is more likely than not a flat spot or two. Closely related to the zigzag is the run that goes across everything else. Here at Okemo, you can see this terrain pod going mostly down and a little right. And right in the middle of that is this green that's going mostly left, at almost a 90-degree angle with all of the other runs. It can reasonably be assumed that in a run that's going almost perfectly perpendicular to the fall line, there will be some flat spots. This Okemo run is also an example of the third sign, names that include the words traverse, road, or some derivative thereof. Of course, there are also some mountains, like Breckenridge, that indicate their flatter trails with a dashed line, and occasionally, a resort will just tell you, such as with Purgatory and their trail named Walk-A-Lot. Regardless, be wary of trail names such as the following, just to name a few: Corona Road, Blackfoot Traverse, Roundabout, 3 Mile Trail, and Boulevard de la Masse. All of these have some element of implication that it's going to be a slog. Finally, some smaller things many people don't pay attention to on the map that can be good to identify. First of all, you've got slow zones. While designed primarily for learning areas, slow zones are also often found in high congestion zones, so if you see a slow zone on the map, you're likely going to be seeing a lot of learners, other guests, or both. Additionally, it's best to know where those zones are so you aren't unpleasantly surprised when the run you'd been eyeing up all morning has a speed limit. Secondly, there's run shape. As previously mentioned, trail maps aren't to scale. However, if a run is perfectly straight on the map, it likely appears that way in real life, and the same goes for curving trails as well. Trails that are perfectly straight are often steeper than those that curve and wind around, but can be a bit more monotonous. A third piece to look for are resort-specific symbols. Many East Coast mountains will show which runs have snowmaking, allowing you to identify which runs will have better snow cover. Other maps may show trails used for night skiing, trails often closed for racing, trails that have moguls, and a vast variety of other features. The racing one in particular can be pretty clutch, so you don't end up getting rejected from a run you've been planning around. The fourth concept to identify is unmarked cutoffs. The artists that paint the trail maps do so by studying aerial photography, along with having flown around and been on the ground at the ski area themselves to get a feel for the resort. As such, even if there's no run label or line through it, a gap in the trees that can be seen on the map might make for a helpful cutoff. Do be careful with this one though, as it wouldn't be wise to fully rely on these. The fifth piece is on-mountain facilities. These have different implications at each different ski area, but in general you may want to avoid those areas around lunchtime, or maybe you want to have the location memorized so you can just find it at lunchtime. Either way, it's good just to have a general awareness not just of lifts and major runs, but of where facilities are as well. The sixth and final element to identify is safety. Notice where patrol stations, marked hazards, permanently closed zones, and emergency phones are located. Being aware of these can help if conditions change or someone in your group needs assistance. After all, many ski mountains are extremely remote, and their cell network reflects as such. Alright, let's put everything together and plan a short, efficient series at Vail. This is where it gets fun, a little bit of ski Tetris, if you will. For this exercise, we're advanced intermediate skiers aiming to get the full Vail experience on a February Saturday morning. We'll want to start where we have multiple lift options and can avoid long lines. Lion's Head fits that perfectly. There, the gondola goes higher and is more prominent, so lines will be longer. We'll instead start with the Born Free lift. Avanti looks like it will be busy, with long straight blues. The run to get there, Cub's Way, is perpendicular to most terrain, so it could be flat. There's this unmarked cutoff that might take us to Pride Express, which should be less crowded. We'll try that cutoff first, keeping Avanti as a backup. From the top of Pride, we want to work toward the back bowls. Avanti is lower on the mountain, so it's likely to get busier faster as the morning progresses. Game Trail looks well graded based on its solid line, so we'll ski it to the Game Creek lift. From the top of that, let's go into the back bowls. Sundown Bowl is wide and expansive, where no run stands out as the primary line. With multiple options and 2 lifts, congestion shouldn't be a huge problem. We'll pick the nicest looking run and then ride the high noon lift. Next, we aim to reach the China Bowl. Slot is the only fall line blue in that area, so it's probably busy, and Sleepy Time Road is labeled as flat. Looking at the front side map, a ridgeline blue on the front side allows us to get to the Northwoods blue, which takes us down to the Northwoods lift. Adjacent green slow zones indicate high traffic here, so we'll bypass Northwoods and head to Highline, which should be quieter since it looks pretty out of the way and doesn't serve much terrain. From Highline, we need to cross 2 and ride up Sourdough to reach the China Bowl entrance. Poppy Fields West is likely crowded, but it's iconic and we want the full experience. We'll ski it, then cross the catwalk to Skyline Lift to enter Blue Sky Basin. Cloud 9 is marked flat, so we skip that, especially since nearby black runs offer tree skiing, which we haven't done yet. We'll take a black line, explore some trees, and exit via the Teacup lift, which will probably get busier later in the day since it's a primary egress lift, but shouldn't be too bad in the morning. For lunch, Two Elk Lodge looks ideal. The approach from the top of Teacup isn't directly on a run, but Lift 14 and nearby Whiskey Jack make it accessible. We'll finish the day by skiing Whiskey Jack and riding Sourdough to get us closer, with Sourdough being our only repeat lift. So there you have it, the Vail experience while avoiding as many flat spots and lift lines as possible solely by looking at the trail map. Your plan probably differed from mine, and that's exactly the fun of it. Ski resort trail maps introduce a puzzle of sorts, and solving it can be the difference between an average day and one you'll tell stories about for years. All that said, I'd like to now encourage you to try all of this out for yourself for some unfamiliar mountain. We'd love to hear about any epiphanies down in the comments. As always, we thank you all for watching. All my love, I'm out.